Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. So pleased to see such a wonderful crowd here this evening. Tonight, we present two distinguished speakers whose personal contributions to innovation in the industry have earned them tremendous respect around the world. Greg Becker and Arvind Sodhani, welcome, and thank you so much for spending your evening with us tonight. This program would not have been possible without the help of Intel Capital, particularly Peter DeLevitt and Lee Sessions, and Silicon Valley Bank, in particular Tracy Isaac and Chris Stedman. Thank you so much. A few words about the Churchill Club. Our mission is to encourage innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. Now, in our 30th year, we convene discussions and audiences up to 40 times a year, invite insightful speakers to share their views about the implications of timely tech-related trends, just as our speakers will be doing for us this evening, and what they believe the future holds. We always respectfully ask our speakers to think in terms of advancing collective understanding, not pitching, and to contribute new thinking and ideas to advance collective understanding in that way. Churchill Club actually got its start at Silicon Valley Bank, although without official sanction, I suspect. Lore is that one of our founders, while employed at the bank, repurposed one of the phone lines to answer Churchill Club, and remember flyers, was using the copy machine to produce flyers to promote Churchill programs. And so thank you, SVB, for that early support. There's also an important early connection with Intel. Our very first speaker in November 1985 was none other than the CEO of Intel, Bob Noyce, who also at one point was a Churchill Club board member. We invite you to join us for our next series of programs. Next up on April 29th, it is Socially Conscious Careers, Innovating for Good. And then on May 21st, one of our most popular programs, the 17th annual Top 10 Tech Trends, with an all-star group of venture capitalists who will go out on a limb with their predictions for trends that are not obvious today that they believe could see explosive growth in about 5 years' time. One final announcement, if you are tweeting, please use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you'll find other Twitter codes in your programs. And I'm now privileged to introduce our speakers, starting with Arvind. Arvind Sodhani is Executive Vice President of Intel Corporation and President of Intel Capital. He joined Intel Europe in 1981, which was a milestone year when the IBM PC computer, personal computer, was introduced, running on a 4.77 megahertz Intel 8088 microprocessor. Arvind rose to become treasurer of Intel just 7 years later, and at that time, he instigated Intel investments in startups, which was really where Intel Capital got its start. And eventually, he agreed to assume leadership as president of Intel Capital and has been ably leading that effort for the past decade. And Greg Becker is president and CEO of Silicon Valley Bank and SVB Financial Group. He joined in 1993, and SVB was founded in '82 as a bank for startups and the technology innovation community. And to this day, the bank holds a dominant position among startups and venture capital communities globally. Along the path to his present role, Greg held other leadership positions at SVB, including COO, Chief Banking Officer, and he also headed up the Venture Capital Group. He is the 5th top executive at SVB in its 33-year history, and actually had the pleasure at one point of working with all the leaders at one time. And both Greg and Arvind have certainly gained unique insights from their uncommonly successful careers. They share a passion for innovation, among other things that I am sure we will hear about tonight. So please give a warm Churchill Club welcome to Greg Becker and Arvind Sodhani.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen.
We've
Thanks for
been
inviting us.
part of Churchill Club for since inception, as we found out. Whether we thought we were starting it or not, that's good to know. You know, when you think about all the different speakers you guys have had over the years and what you're doing, it's a real tribute to Churchill Club for what you've done over that 30-year period to help Silicon Valley. So congratulations to you and to the rest of the Churchill Club team. So great job. Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
You know, tonight, Arvind and I are just going to have a discussion for probably about 45 minutes. We're going to talk about the market, talk a little bit about Intel, Silicon Valley Bank, and leadership, and maybe some personal stories along the way. But we really want to make sure we engage you. So we'll do 45 minutes and maybe 30 minutes of Q&A from the audience. So have your questions ready. So I'm going to start.
Only softballs.
Easy questions. Easy questions. Your son, Arjun, was sitting up here, and so I was making sure that he was going to ask really hard questions of you. So
that was not on the script. Having my son sit next to you and spill the beans.
I've got some really good questions for you later on that should be pretty fascinating. Yeah. So one of the questions that you and I get asked all the time, Arvind, is just about the market and where we are, and you know, we can both answer the question, you know, are we in a bubble, are we not, and we can add a lot of background to it. But if you really had to kind of give what I'll call a number to it, if you had to say, you know, a 10 is, it's 1999, and a 1 is, it's kind of in that, you know, the downturn's happening and valuations are low and we're all headed up to the right. Where would you describe where we are right now?
Well, that's a tough question, and it's one where I get to be wrong about 3 months from now. In some areas, I would say the valuations are pretty stretched. You have new players. So you have the traditional VCs who would invest in private startup companies, but now you're seeing the emergence of the corporate investors who seem to be willing to pay much higher prices. Much higher valuations, and we're seeing that many of the recent very, very high valuations were done by corporate investors. And they must see some value there, a strategic value that may not be obvious to the professional investors like you and me. You know, that may very well be the case. In some industries, I have to stop and ask myself, is this a software company? Is this a services company? And for all intents and purposes, it looks like a services company and having a software valuation. So you have to ask yourself, well, I always ask myself, first of all, did I get it wrong? Is it really a software company? And I think it's a services company. And those, I think, valuations are pretty stretched, I think, at this point in time.
So if you had to give it a number, what would you give it?
On the other hand, we see lots of other companies that are not quite as stretched and have huge opportunities. I think I'll come to the number in a minute. Semiconductor companies, startups, Silicon Valley got started with semiconductor startups. And Intel being one of those. Intel got started as a VC-funded startup, as Karen mentioned, funded by Arthur Rock when both Gordon and Noyce left Fairchild. And semiconductor funding has gone out of vogue, and those companies and hardware companies, nobody's paying a lot of attention to hardware, but they're making a little bit of a comeback. We're going to need a lot of hardware companies if many of the disruptions and innovations that we are seeing today, for example, driverless cars going to require a lot of hardware as well as software, not just software. Drones, again, lots of hardware will be needed to make all of that possible. When you think through drones and what it takes to make that all work, think of navigation, think of all the things that went into a smartphone, for example. Low power, battery life, the ability to display. All those will go into the drone in much larger proportion because you'll need more battery life. You need to be light because it's going to have to carry all of that. So I think hardware companies are going to make a comeback, and I think those will be, those currently are pretty well priced. So I'd say we are probably somewhere between a 6 and a 7 at this point in time, if I take the whole collection. That is not to say that there are not some 9s and 10s in there, and that is not to say that there are not some 3s and 5s in there, but I'd say we're in the 6 to 7 range. Certainly, we are continuing to invest as you are.
Yep.
You are continuing to lend to many of our portfolio companies, for which I thank you.
That's great. So you're kind of in that 6 to 7 range. I'd probably say it's maybe a little bit higher than that.
Yeah, that's
so
possible.
maybe a 7 or 8. So what I thought we'd do is to kind of make it a little engaging with the audience. Let's do this. Let's show a poll, and you have to vote either way. Right? So we're going to do a vote, and you got to raise your hand if you think it's more towards a bubble, right, or less towards a bubble, right? So we're going to do that, and then we're going to have Arvind doesn't do this, but we're going to have a little debate about both sides, and we're going to take a vote before and a vote after. And we'll see if we can persuade you. So how many people do you guys think are we more closely looking at a bubble right now? Does it feel more like 99? All right. What do you think, Chris? What do you think the...
Closer to 7 and 8.
7 or 8. What do you think? If you had to keep your hands up, what percentage of people out there got their hands up? What do you think?
That's 50%.
No, not numbers. Just no. This is if you think it's more towards a bubble, right? If you'd argue more towards a bubble, right? So maybe, I don't know, maybe 60%. Let's go to the other side. Don't think it's a bubble, and we're in a different era. All right, so definitely more towards a bubble than less. So probably 60-40. All right, so I'm going to argue. I'm going to take the side, because mine was a 7 or 8, that we're more towards a bubble. And Arvind, you get 5 points. I'll do 5 points. Let's see kind of what your arguments would be. So I'll start. So one of my arguments would be that we have an office up on Sand Hill Road. And I was coming out of the Sand Hill Road office, and this is just like 99. There was a tour bus in front of Kleiner Perkins, a tour bus, right? Point number 1. The value, there's $80 billion plus private companies right now, 80 billion plus private companies right now, which is, I remember 8, 9, 10 years ago where there were, not that many billion-dollar plus companies. We're starting to see more companies that are getting decent valuations where they're pre-revenue. So you're looking at $50, $60, $70 million valuation companies before they have any revenue at all, which again goes back to what it felt like in 99. And maybe a fourth point I would make is there's a lot of copy companies. So I don't think we're really priced for the risk that the companies are having. So I would be on the side it's more towards, I'm not saying we're in a bubble, just to be clear for anyone tweeting, but more towards a bubble.
Yeah.
So
counter would be, first of all, it got a lot cheaper to start companies. With the cloud and the infrastructure that's available to start up companies, it used to take a lot more capital to get started, a lot more capital to sustain yourself, a lot more capital to hire the right people. Now with being able to do everything in the cloud, outsource everything, it got a lot cheaper too. And that obviously reduces the risk. And then on the other hand, you now have markets that were not previously open and previously did not exist, and the world did not think of them as potential customers. So, you and I just got back from China last week.
It's funny, we were in the speaker's room before, and Arvind said, how's your China operations going? I said, it's going pretty well. I just got back on Friday from China. He's like, I just got back from China on Friday. So we were both in China last week.
Yeah, there are 1.4 billion consumers in China. Most startup companies in China acquire 10 million customers like that over the weekend. And 100 million is not out of the question for them to get in the first 6 months. So I think the size of the market, the TAM of market has changed from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, very few people, 10, 15 years ago, very few companies thought of these global markets that we have. We have China, we have India, we have Brazil, and that we haven't even started thinking about African countries. So I think the opportunities are huge. The distribution costs have gone down.
Yep.
Yeah. It doesn't cost as much to sell product in China. Once upon a time, only the largest companies like Intel would contemplate, selling product in various parts of the world. Now it's a lot easier. So in many industries, that's a huge positive.
Yep. So what do you guys think? Anyone change their mind more towards a bubble? Anyone feel more towards a bubble? Less towards a bubble? Yep, less. All right. So we're not playing this game anymore. No, it is. I mean, I could argue either side too. To me, one of the phase that we're in right now, which I think is so interesting, is that before, if you take an Uber, an Airbnb, and companies like that, companies that were formed in Silicon Valley would have been selling software to hotels to be more efficient. And a company like Uber would be selling software to car companies and Avises and so forth to be more efficient. And now they're changing it around the dynamic, and they're saying, actually, we can destroy that industry. We can change the industry completely.
Disruption, yeah.
A disruption is happening. I was at an event where we were asking a question of like 30 people in the room, and they said, what's your favorite app? And to be in that room, and it was about 25% of the people that said Uber was their favorite app. And that company hasn't been around that long, and to have that much brand recognition is truly unprecedented. So I think we're going to see more unbelievable companies formed right now and over the next few years than in history by a wide margin.
Yep.
The question still is it being, the valuations, is there really risk being priced into it? And that's my only question. Yeah. So not is there great companies being formed, it's more the risk side.
Let me add something in favor of what you were saying. I think that what has happened is that we have had some spectacular exits. Think of LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. Some incredible where the investors have done spectacularly well. And what that has done is it's attracting a lot of capital. And as you can imagine, with yields being negative in Europe and other parts of the world and almost nothing in the US, and for now, a very sustained period of time in VC terms, it's attracting, what that has done is that there's a lot of capital trying to find and seeking the Facebooks and the returns of Facebook. Now, we all know that there are only going to be half a dozen Facebooks in the next decade or so. Yep. But nevertheless, there is all that capital chasing the Facebook or the LinkedIn return. And so you're getting this valuation because everybody thinks that they have found the next big win. And so there's more capital willing to pay more valuation. And I think that's dangerous. And then you also have as I mentioned earlier, you have the corporate players who see strategic value in a very different light, in a very different way, and they are willing to pay up. So that's. But then going back to the other issue, and that's disruption. I think that we get in Silicon Valley not just innovation, but we also get disruption. And Karen, you need to add the word disruption in your preamble, because it's not just about innovation, because
that's a great point.
I mean, you guys here in Silicon Valley, we will disrupt the auto industry. Just imagine that 10 years from now, a decade from now, you're going to be driving a car. You will not be driving the car will be driving you, and all that disruption is going to take place here. Yep. It's going to be from Silicon Valley, where the invention of a driverless car will take place, and it will happen. We are seeing, and Mark is here, who's our MD, who follows this industry very closely. We were just having this chat this afternoon that the amount of disruption that's going to come out of just that industry is going to be unbelievable. It's going to change insurance, I'm sure the initial reaction of the insurance companies is going to be, pay us more premium because we don't know how it's going to. But if the cars can't crash into each other, why should you have to pay for insurance? So there's going to be disruption, and there will be industries that we don't even think about today. Yep. For example, insurance are going to get disrupted because it's going to be hard if the driverless cars will not collide with one another, then you will not have a need for an insurance, or the risk that you're insuring for is gone down very dramatically, and insurance companies are going to get disrupted.
So you talked about Silicon Valley specifically, but
yeah.
So Intel Capital, you invest all over the world. Yeah. We have offices all over the United States and in international countries as well. And so my question to you is, if you look at the last 10 years, do you think Silicon Valley has gotten stronger, or has there been more innovation disruption happening outside the Silicon Valley? So is it getting stronger, or is it being kind of disaggregated across the globe?
Yeah, I think that recently I would say that we're beginning to see more innovation and more what I call black hole. I think that what we are beginning to see is that a lot of companies from outside of Silicon Valley are actually moving into Silicon Valley because they want to be here. Yep. They're willing to pay the higher cost of hiring people. They're willing to pay the real estate costs. They're willing to pay the transportation costs. They're willing to live have offices in buildings that are infinitely smaller to versus what they would pay elsewhere. They want to be here because this is where they feel the energy, they feel the innovation, they feel the right sets of skills that they cannot find in other parts of the world. So yes, I would say that we are increasingly seeing the innovation and disruption coming here and getting stronger.
Yeah, we see that too. I'm on the board of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and we just did a study on competitiveness. And one of the things was, how is Silicon Valley so competitive and what drives it? And one of the things we looked at was GDP per employee. GDP per employee. And Silicon Valley was off the charts compared to any other market. And so you're seeing more companies come here because they say the talent is here that's so differentiated. It's such a microcosm here of such unique talent that people are coming here despite the costs, and it's costs in every category. What do you see what derails that? What derails that?
I think that's because there are people here who have the guts to wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm going to disrupt a 200-year-old industry. I mean, we have people like that here who have that, who thinks like that. Yeah, not many people. I think there are people here who wake up one day and they say, you know what, I have a great idea and I'm going to disrupt the automotive industry by making driverless cars, or I'm going to, I'm going to invent drones and we were just talking about drones earlier. Think of drones. Drones will disrupt a lot of industries. They just don't know it's coming, Yep. The easiest one is, think of Amazon delivering packages with drones. Guess who's going to get disrupted by that? FedEx.
It's funny you bring that up. When I first heard that story about Amazon possibly doing that, I thought that was the most ridiculous idea I'd ever heard. And then we held a drone event not that long ago, and there was a bunch of different companies that had drones and robots. I mean, no kidding, right? I mean, if somebody was said 22 years ago, I'd be at a drone, it doesn't exist, what the hell it was, or robots, you'd say impossible. To sit there and to see the robots and the drones and what they could do, you literally sat there and said, actually, that isn't as crazy as it sounds, and it's probably not that far away. It's a little bit like the driverless car.
Or not unlike Uber.
Yeah.
It does have a lot of heavy lifting in front of it.
Yep.
It has regulatory issues. It has battery life issue. It has weight issue. It has all those issues that I'm sure we'll overcome.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah, they'll figure it out. And there will be a lot of very rich entrepreneurs as a result of that, and there will be large companies invented that nobody's heard of today. You know?
So let me switch the discussion, and if there's more questions you guys have about the market, we can jump into that. But let me switch over to Intel Capital. So you've been at Intel since '81. You kind of became president of Intel Capital in '95, and I don't know if you guys saw this. PitchBook just came out with a report a week or so ago, or a couple weeks ago, and it was, ironically, since you became president of Intel Capital, it went back to last decade, so 95 to 2005. I'm sorry, 2005 to 2015, and it was which venture capitalists have produced the most exits, and it was M&A and it was IPO. And so Intel Capital has the #1 most exits in M&A and the #2 in IPOs of all venture capitalists anywhere. So congratulations,
Thank you.
Arvind.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's pretty amazing you got them to publish that just a few days before you came up here on stage.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that was really nice of them to do that.
We had to sponsor them for the next 20 years.
So the question.
Lee is worried about his budget, you know.
So when you think about that success, I mean, and you were to look back over the last decade, I know you can go back further than that, but let's just focus on the last decade. What would you say are the 2-3 things that were such the keys to success?
Well, one thing is we didn't invest enough. Wish we had invested a lot more.
How much did you guys invest over that?
So we're typically investing between 300 to 500 million a year. And what we're noticing is that when we are closer to 300, so 350, 360, 400, we tend to do better than when we are closer to 500. So it seems like 350, 360 is our sweet spot.
Yep.
Those years where we invest those kinds of numbers, we do much better IRR than when we go all out and invest 500 million. But I don't regret. I do wish we had invested in more of those companies that produced those numbers for us. This is all about people. You know, it's having the right team, and I believe we have one of the best teams in the Valley. We have 150 people in Intel Capital. And we have 70 investment folks, investment professionals, located globally in 26 countries, including the U.S. So we have a very good team. They have been with us forever. So it's a very seasoned, experienced team. And then, we are very disciplined. We have been very disciplined in making sure that we don't get carried away. So don't fall in love with deals.
Just on that question about discipline, you get 150 people. How do you make decisions? I mean, when you have, I know partnerships that have 3 or 4 partners and they have a hard time figuring out which deals to do. With 150 people inside the firm, I know they're not investing partners, but how do you decide on which deals to do and which deals not to do?
Yeah, so we obviously are organized, and we have a very methodical, being part of Intel, we're obviously very process-driven, so we have a very well-organized process as to how we look at deals, how we look at investment opportunities from all over the world. And what we do is we have investment managers who are specialized by domain, by sector, and then we have teams that are positioned by geo. So we'll, for example, have a team in Brazil, we have a team in Israel, we have a team in China, very large team in China, and they specialize in their markets, in their home markets. But we use the same process. We look at everything at the beginning very carefully. So I sit on the committee that does that. We look at a team at the beginning, and then we look at the deal just before we sign, and we have lots of debates, lots of discussion, make sure that it makes sense for us. And we follow that process consistently, and we have a lot of analysis that is stuff that is now required as part of the proposal that we make. Try not to make too many exceptions, because exceptions are the ones that either produce humongous returns or produce failures. So
Intel, the lore goes over the years that Intel is notorious for being very aggressive in the debate and arguing points of view and so forth. Is that I mean, how does that play out in investment? Is that how you see it playing out at Intel?
Yeah.
And then I'll ask your team afterwards what that's
Well,
how it plays out.
the person who's brought the team is obviously going to be very passionate about their team. It's their idea, they like it, and they have to be passionate because if you're not passionate enough about it, then it's probably not the right investment opportunity. Conversely, the people who are reviewing it are going to be throwing stones and asking a zillion questions that would appear to be very argumentative, very discussion oriented. But at the end of the day, I think all parties, all the people in the discussion will conclude one way or the other whether it makes sense to move forward, invest or not.
Yeah. So maybe one last question on Intel Capital. What was the best deal that you did, and what was the biggest deal you missed?
Oh, we've missed a lot of deals. That's for sure. One of the things that we do regularly is we go back and do postmortems.
Yep.
And we do postmortems of deals that failed, that we have had to take impairment on. We also do postmortems on deals that we did very well on. We also look at deals that we missed. And invariably, it turns out that our deal flow is very good. We saw those deals. We'd feel terrible if we hadn't seen the deals. But we turned them down, and we feel bad about that, obviously. But at least we had seen the deal, so the deal flow came to us, which is very powerful, because if you're an investor, you want the deal flow, because without the deal flow, you're not going to make the right investments if you're just not seeing the deal flow. So we are, in that sense, have now built a brand name that brings virtually every deal, get to us, and we have visibility and we see them. The fact that we turn them down sometimes, it's obviously our mistake, our error. But nobody does this 100%. It just doesn't happen. Yeah.
So what's the best deal? What's the one?
Well, well, actually, I brought a cheat sheet.
All right.
One of my guys. So I'll give you a list of all the companies that we feel really good about. So VMware.
Is this the way team he's always at? He doesn't answer questions.
VMware, Broadcom, Citrix, Smart Technologies, Canada,
Yep.
Red Hat, Kingsoft in China. Kingsoft is Lei Jun, who has now restarted. So there's a story there for you. Kingsoft was one of our portfolio companies. Lei Jun was the founder. He exited. We made a bundle. He made a bundle. He came back to us and presented his next idea. We said, expensive, Well, guess what? Guess what company it was? Xiaomi. So
We know the answer to the second
that's what I
question.
mean. We missed them too.
Yeah.
Sohu.com, another Chinese portal. Sasken in India, PCCW in Hong Kong, now the largest telecom. AVG, Sonda, Marvell here locally, Box. Let's see, Mellanox, another local company. I'm trying to pick names that you would recognize. RIM, BlackBerry was the only investment they took was our investment. So
Hopefully you sold out.
yeah, so we did really well. We really did.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Let me ask you.
I enjoy asking you questions.
Yeah. So Greg, you guys have a perch and a visibility that is quite unique. You guys literally have no competition, if I may put it that way. You have visibility on everything that moves around here. What's happening? What are you seeing here that makes you feel great?
So I wish we had no competition. We keep trying, but it doesn't work. I think what we're seeing is that you're seeing. You said this earlier. The cost to start a new company is the lowest it's ever been. The cost to bring revenue in is the lowest it's ever been. And more people are thinking about starting new businesses and innovation than I can recall. We're bringing in thousands of new companies per year of new clients. And it truly is amazing. And whether it's a drone companies, I mean, I've looked at new clients that have come in a few years back, and they were, doing satellites. And literally, you sit down with them, and I walk out of the meeting just scratching my head, going, I can't believe we're looking at a satellite company in Silicon Valley. And a few years later, it gets acquired for hundreds of millions of dollars. It is, and I believe this, that it is the most exciting time to be in the innovation economy in this disruptive space than ever, because you got two things happening, right? So you have one is all these new companies being formed, which is awesome. But what we also have is all the traditional companies have to figure out how to disrupt as well, or else they're going to be disrupted. So if you think about it, almost every company now is in the space of having to change and innovate and disrupt. And the market size for these innovative companies just went up exponentially. Mm-hmm. And again, I think for all of us that are in this sector, I truly believe there isn't a better time to be in this market, whether it's a little bit inflated or not. I think over the long run, we're all going to look back at this and go, oh my gosh, we were so fortunate. So whether it's in Silicon Valley, whether it's in Boston, New York, I was in China, you were in China last week, and again, amazing what these startups are doing in these foreign countries. So I think we're just at the beginning of a long trend.
Yeah. What are you seeing in China?
So you said this, and I agree. And I think we all hate the company that walks in the door and says the market size is $100 trillion, and if we just get 1%, look how big that number is. And we all kind of roll our eyes at that. But guess what? It works. In China, with 1.5 billion people, I mean, literally, if they come up with an idea and it works and they can scale, and that's the other part that I think I'm so impressed with so many of the Chinese entrepreneurs, their ability to scale is unbelievable. Right. They are, I mean, once something starts to work, and Xiaomi is a perfect example. If somebody would have said you'd see a company go from 5 years ago, roughly, from 6 years ago, 0 to how many handsets did they sell?
It was 100 million.
100 million units. 100 million handsets in 5 years.
Please don't remind me.
It's okay. We'll come up with another company, but I mean that's so. In the U.S., we've never seen anything like that, and there, whether it's the spinouts of what's happening at Alibaba and Baidu and Tencent. I mean, the entrepreneurs, they're amazing, and they're amazing. They're becoming more amazing everywhere. Again, which goes back to my earlier point. I just think we feel, really fortunate.
Do you get the impression that the Chinese government is encouraging or doing something that we should be worried about or learn from? Because we're not seeing that in other parts of the world. We're seeing that, exclusively in China.
I think it's a great question, and I would say it's both. We should be worried about it, and we should learn something from it. And here's what I think we should learn from it. The Chinese government does these 5-year plans, 5-year strategic plans, and they do another plan every 5 years, which is kind of like, what's our agenda, right? And when they set that up, the last, I think, 2 or 3 plans, innovation has been part of that agenda. So you think about this. The government sets a plan, and the country rallies around that plan. Wouldn't this be a novel concept? And so when you see this, all of a sudden, the whole country marches down this path. So what we're seeing as an example, we have a joint venture in China, and we have a banking license, and we're going to be expanding that. And the Chinese government has come to us. I was there last week, and you'd see regulators in China, and they'd be sitting down with us and saying, how can we help you out? That was my conversation Thursday afternoon. I walked in our office. Chinese regulator came in, and he was coming in, and the sole purpose of the visit was to ask the question what he could do to help us out so we could take our Silicon Valley Bank model and apply it in China, right? So I'm spending tomorrow, I have 4 hours of meetings with regulators. My guess the meeting will not be the same.
How can we stop you?
So it literally is. So I think it's a mindset. So it's something we can learn from, right? The challenge with that is they literally have a ton of money and they have a lot of resources to apply to this market. So they're giving grants, they're giving ways to make it more competitive. So in some ways it is anti-competitive because of this sort of things in solar and things like that. But it's scary on one hand, but I do believe they're a force to be reckoned with, the government, in how they approach going after a market, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, one thing I would worry about is the Chinese cost structure. Generally, the Chinese startup companies get to a certain point at much lower cost. Their products are much lower. And that could be a problem for the US or for the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
Because very successful market positions obtained in China at a much lower cost point could then produce a significant outcome in the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
And that could be very difficult and very competitive I think that's something that we in Silicon Valley have to understand, that the cost structure needs to be lowered. Yeah.
So we had about 10 minutes until Q&A, so let me ask a couple questions outside of this first one. Let me get some personal stuff. It's a little bit on the Intel side, but so I'm bridging. So the bridge would be, so you've been at Intel since '81, so 34 years, and done a phenomenal job at Intel Capital. At some point, out in the future, way out in the future, you'll retire or do something different. When you think back at Intel Capital, and you were saying, like, what would be that legacy that you'd like to have, that you'd like to be Intel Capital be known for, that you'd be known for, and the accomplishments of Intel Capital, what would it be?
Well, obviously, all the companies that we have financed and helped become successful. Because one of the things we tried to do, years ago, when I started thinking about, okay, how can we become number one in the Valley? Some of the things that I realized very quickly was that we couldn't copy the VC model per se, because we couldn't pay. As part of a corporation, we simply couldn't pay the people what the VC folks are able to, the partnerships are willing and able to pay. We just couldn't afford to do that. And so what was the model that would differentiate us? Because there's always been tons of capital, and even more so today.
Yep.
Why would you, an entrepreneur, take capital from us, Intel Capital, versus other VCs? And so in order to differentiate ourselves, I did a couple of things. One was that we said that the investment manager, who's the person at the lowest person in the hierarchy of Intel Capital. So we have MDs and we have investment managers. And instead of having, and MDs are the equivalent of partners,
yep,
and investment managers are people who do all the work. What we said was the way to attract people would be to have the investment managers do the deals, sit on the boards, and so that we'd be able to provide at a much earlier stage a level of activity, a level of experience that you wouldn't get in a partnership. In a partnership, you'd have to wait forever. You'd become a partner, then you'd be able to do the deals, own the deals, sit on boards. In Intel Capital, you could be a couple of years, 3 years into Intel Capital, and you could be out there searching for deals, hunting for deals.
Yep.
And that attracted a lot of people to come to us. And so that really compensated for the fact that we just couldn't pay the people, the big bucks they carry. Although we did invent the carry program, a limited carry program, which also helped. So that really helped attract the people. The other thing we also did was we thought through and said, where's our value proposition? What unique differentiated value will we bring to our portfolio companies? And thanks to Lee here, we came up with this idea that we'll help our portfolio companies find their customers. Because as you can imagine, we have the most incredible Rolodex. We know everybody on the face of this earth that matters in IT. And since our companies are technology companies, we started these programs where we would introduce our portfolio companies to their eventual customers. And if you're a $50 million company or if you're a $30 million startup company, finding a customer is the hardest thing to do. Going to a large corporation and trying to find who the decision maker is, getting them to buy your product or your service, or even meet with you will take 6 months to a year. And so we started this program of introducing our portfolio companies to all these companies, and we do this. We do hundreds of these introductions, systematic, as you would imagine at Intel. Everything has to be scale, systematic, So, we'd go to any number of Fortune 500 companies. We'll take 15, 20 of our portfolio companies that they have selected, that they have an interest in meeting. We make the introduction. I mean, this is a door opener if there's one.
Absolutely.
And this is very systematic. And so we've been very helpful to our portfolio companies. And what I'd like to see all of these companies become really successful. And we can go back and look at them, later on and say, wow, we helped this company. And some of these companies will become billion-dollar companies, and some of them will become our competitors, in many cases.
Well, if that's your definition of a legacy, it looks like you're on a good path.
I sure hope so.
That's great. So a question. So you went to University of Michigan, and I went to Indiana. So we're both Big Ten people, which is great. Hopefully we win in basketball. You can win in football, especially with Harbaugh now at Michigan, which is pretty impressive. So how did you end up at Michigan?
Well, it's a long story. So
give a short version.
Short version. I was at University of London. The calendar there ended in September. All the business schools started here. They start in early. So I had this 1 month overlap between where I was finishing and where the business school programs start. And so Michigan at that point in time had a program where they started in January. And they had this program for 2 years where they said, why don't we bring people in January instead of in September?
Did you look at the temperature in Michigan in
No,
January?
And so I got off the plane. I got the biggest shock of my life. So that's how I ended up in Michigan. Well, that's the official story. So
is Harbaugh going to turn around the program?
I think so. He's a great guy. He'll do well.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Explain to me, what is Hoosier? Something that I've never. Now, I know the governor was trying to explain that away a couple of weeks ago.
That is a great question. I have no idea what it actually is, but it's so I went to Indiana, so our mascot was the Hoosiers, and I actually don't know what our mascot was. So I kind of look at it. I think we had that name before Stanford had the Cardinal. I don't know what the hell that is either. So I guess we're in good company.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know. I have no idea what it was for. So let me ask you maybe one time for one or two questions back and forth here. So one of the things that I know in talking to people that are close to you, and I know from interacting with you, and your son and I were catching up about, is your passion for wine, and I know you've got wine better than anybody else. So where did that come from? I heard you've been collecting since you were
since I was in Michigan. Yeah.
Since Michigan.
Yeah, I was. I went to school in England, and I started drinking wine. And then when in Ann Arbor, I got invited to something, and I said, "Can I have some wine, please?" And they looked at me and said, "Who the hell is this guy asking for wine? We drink beer here." So I was the odd person out drinking wine while everybody else was drinking beer. But I always had, I always liked wine, and have been interested in wine, and have had the pleasure of drinking some great wines with many of you. Some of my drinking buddies are here in the audience. So I'm absolutely happy and delighted. Eating and drinking is one of my great passions. As a matter of fact, now that you give me the opening, here's, we recently bought a vineyard, and we now make wine. It's, as you would imagine, it's called Sodhani. Sodhani vineyard. And so I'd like to thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you. So, as I think a lot of you guys know, we have a high-end wine practice, and So I was going to give you a gift as well. And knowing that you are a kind of a wine snob, I had to reach pretty deep in the cellar to come up with something that was going to be worthy of your wine taste. So here's what I got for you. So this is a
Harlan.
1992
Whoa.
Harlan Estates wine. So here you go.
Thank you so
Enjoy.
much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. That's a good picture. That's a good picture. I know. Raymond wants to open them up now. Okay with me? Yeah, let's go. All right, so let's open up to questions you guys have about whatever the topic you guys want to cover. It could be the market, could be Intel Capital, could be Silicon Valley Bank, whatever you guys want to ask us, we are open to trying to answer. Yeah, Ken.
From the 92 Harlan come from?
Actually, the vineyard we bought used to sell grapes to Harlan.
No kidding.
Yeah.
All right.
But we have stopped doing that now. Now we're making our own wine.
Yeah, so back here. Wait for the microphone real quick.
Is this thing on? So one thing you guys didn't mention, but I'm interested to hear your opinions about is IoT. And the other is, what do you guys expect is going to disrupt your companies?
Sorry, what was the tail
What was the
end?
second question?
What do you think that is going to come along that's going to disrupt your companies?
Huh, that's interesting. So, do you want to start with the Internet of Things?
No, please.
I'm
happy to talk.
Again, I think if you look back at the Internet of Things over the last 4 or 5 years, and certain companies have been talking about that for a while, much like the drones, what you're seeing now is literally, everything. Everything has a chip in it of some kind. Hopefully it's Intel. And from that standpoint, it allows you to connect. And so, again, I think it's what I said earlier about we're in this space of innovation and disruption, and it's everywhere. That's a great example. Internet of Things, by definition, means everything will be connected to the internet in some way. So again, I think we're going to see the innovation we're going to see with Internet of Things is going to be absolutely mind-boggling. We're seeing it in the home now, and you'll see it in the car. You're going to see it in almost every device will have it in there. And so I think if you look out in the next, and it's not that far, 3, 4, 5 years, it's going to be truly incredible. So I know what you want to.
Yeah, I think
to
as John Chambers said, Internet of Things is huge, is gigantic. And the very interesting thing is that there is an ROI in the Internet of Things equation. Enterprises and industries adopt things that have positive ROI. And it clearly, the examples that we're seeing of IoT applications are very interesting and have positive ROI, which means that they will get adopted. In the home, it's going to be a little bit harder. I think in the home, people are a little bit tired of paying $29.99 per month for everything, one after the other. But it'll get adoption in the home as well. But in the industrial sector, in the enterprises, I think enterprises will go for it. Sending a guy out to go change a light in the middle of the night in the parking lot is very expensive. It's very expensive. I'm just giving you some very simple examples. There are a lot of complex examples. A pump failure, a jet engine failure, et cetera. These are very expensive issues, and they will be addressed. And there are very good positive IRRs, ROIs on those applications. So we believe that that will happen. And then with the cost of connection, so the wireless connectivity, which is a critical element of these of IoT happening, is coming down so dramatically that virtually everything will have a chip in it that will both compute obviously, and connect. And battery life is such that where these silicon can be embedded and it will last for years, so you don't have to worry about changing the batteries out. So it's happening. It's huge. Yeah.
So your second question was it about what is going to disrupt our industries? So companies. Well, so we obviously work with so many companies. It's hard to kind of limit what that would be. But let me just talk about financial services. Again, I think I'll give you a number. If you look back in 2000 and you said the number of companies that we banked that were doing things in the fintech area, it would be almost zero. Very few companies were venture-backed in the fintech area. Today, roughly 6% of our portfolio is in something in the financial services. Like a lending club would be a great example of that. And there are so many companies out there that are in this space, whether it's disrupting the payments, credit cards, FX, you name it. And they're all going after, I'd say, big banks for the most part from a disruption perspective. So I think, again, financial services, like all industries, are going to be, they should be worried from the standpoint of what disruption is going to happen. The approach we're taking, because we don't deal with, we have a private bank but not consumer banking, our approach is we should go out and actually partner with them because they need back-end, they need banking infrastructure. Some of them do, many of them do. And we believe we can partner with them and help them, quite honestly, disrupt. So we've taken the approach and not say we're pushing them back. We're saying we should engage them and actually help facilitate the disruption. And we'll see how that plays out, but I'm excited about that over the coming years.
Yeah, so I think we were very fortunate in the sense that we got this unique formula that we got that will keep us from getting disrupted. And it was given to us by this incredible CEO that we had, Andy Grove, that said, only the paranoid survive. And that formula has really helped Intel be very paranoid about getting disrupted and staying ahead and recognizing that unless you're running at 100 miles per hour, you're going to get run over by somebody, and you got to keep disrupting yourself, which is what Intel is obviously famous for and keeps doing and will continue to do.
Yeah, right here. Lee.
Greg, question for you is, I've had a chance to work with a number of your bankers that have supported Intel Capital portfolio companies all over the world. I know you've grown quickly. What do you do to build a culture that really maintains that excellence and that approach towards supporting entrepreneurs?
Yep.
And I'd like to hear Arvind's comment on what you do in similar regard.
Yeah, so, I think, Lee, we spend a lot of time focusing on the clients and describing the client and making sure that every employee inside the company understands the importance of the client. So our mission as a company is to, we'll call it, increase the probability of our clients' success. And how I describe it to companies is that I can't guarantee that if you work with Silicon Valley Bank that you'll be successful, but I believe kind of my heart of hearts that if you're with Silicon Valley Bank, the probability you'll be successful is higher. And there's a lot of, I can back that up in a lot of different ways, but we talk about that a lot. We communicate it across the whole company. So what we set up 4 years ago inside SVB to make sure, as we were growing, again, nowhere near the number of people that Intel has, but we have roughly 2,000 people now. And internal communication, communicating that message and culture is so important. So what we actually did 4 years ago is we built a TV studio inside of SVB. We call it SVB TV, and we have it every Monday morning. And we have all our employees tune into it, and we talk about our values, we talk about our culture, and usually what we'll do is we'll have this morning, Monday, so we had our TV show this morning, and we did at the end of the show, we did a video on one of our clients. And it was one of our clients talking about what they're doing in the healthcare area, and they're talking about how they change lives, how they're having an impact, and how the relationship with Silicon Valley Bank has helped them be successful. So every single employee inside the company hears that. So from our standpoint, it's not just the sales team, it's not just the relationship teams, it's not just the client service teams. It literally is every single person has a responsibility to help our clients. And if you think about it, and we talk about this, when you see the companies we get to work with, I mean, it's awesome. We literally are working with the most incredible, amazing, disruptive companies that are really changing the world. So it's that kind of higher level calling that we really engage our employees in. And I think that makes a big difference because we spend a lot of time at work. So if you can make people feel good about what they're doing and they're making a difference, I think people really end up enjoying what they're doing.
Was there a question for me there?
I probably know the answer, but I'm curious what you do to instill the culture of Intel Capital in terms of
as Greg said, this is a people's business. It's all about people. These are people making decisions on the likely outcome of the performance of other people that we are betting on. And so at the end of the day, after, as I was describing earlier, at the end of the day, after all those discussions and all the questions and you really have to judge the passion of the individual who's bringing the idea and obviously their track record as well. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to trust them to make the final, the call, because they are the one talking, day in, day out with the entrepreneur. They have a better sense. And so it's critically important that after we, kill each other, we still, at the end of the day, say, no, it's your, you gotta make this, this is your idea. You gotta make this successful. That's critically important. That at the end of the day, we trust the person who's brought the idea, spent the energy, worked on it, massaged it, talk to the entrepreneur to go this way, that way, make this change, make that change, that's
just to add on to that, just to kind of in support of that at Intel Capital, I was at an event in London a year ago, and you and I were both there. It was a corporate venturing conference,
right.
And they were giving out awards, and Intel Capital won 50% of the awards that night, and Arvind would come up and get the award, but the thing he would talk about, just reminded me every time, was it was all about the team. When he got up and accepted the award, he would talk about individuals, he would talk about other people inside the company, didn't talk about him at all and the role he played. And so my guess is that actually is a key part of keeping the team together and recognizing the individual contribution of the entire team. So I think it's a great part of what you've done.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions? Yeah.
My name's James. I'm with Airfoil.
I'm a recent Michigan State graduate, so I have to say go green. As holders of wealth and decision makers for your organizations, how do you feel the strategic investment decisions are shaping the future of your particular
Use the
decisions?
microphone, please.
Is it on?
Is it dead?
I think it's dead.
Somebody help.
As holders of wealth, I'm basically curious, how do you feel your strategic investments decisions are shaping the future, and how do you weigh the benefits of a potential prospect against the needs of a growing and changing world? One example being the current drought in California.
Yeah, so I think the question was, how do we look at our strategic decisions in the overall, I'll call, the bigger picture, and how do we assess the success behind it? And the example would be, how do you deal with what's happening in California with the drought, as an example? Is that generally a description? I think we look at it, and there's several ways to look at it, right? There's the corporate decisions that you make, and they're financial decisions, and it's about the long-term, financial return for shareholders. And there's also what you're doing as a company and how you're contributing. I'll give you, and it's less about what's happening in the drought in California, but it's more about how do we help out the ecosystem, is how I would describe it. And I'll give you two examples. One example would be supporting our clients. So again, I'm part of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. We do a lot of, I'll call it lobbying efforts back in Washington, D.C. And I would say when 99% of banks go back to D.C., they're lobbying on behalf of changes they want in D.C. for themselves, right? We go back, and when I go back, it is 99% of what we're lobbying for is actually changes that will actually benefit our clients. And so we think a lot more about the ecosystem, number one. And number two, I would say, is what we do in the community. What we do in the community is very, very important to us, and to me, that's a strategic decision. So we support a lot of different organizations, and I would say that our philosophy is not just writing checks, because you can do that, and that's a great thing to do. But we found, and this helps the culture as well, but I also think it helps the community, is we engage in community activity where people are actually doing the work themselves. So our foundation sets up and we give contributions based on engagement of an employee. So if an employee wants a grant out of our foundation, they have to be actively engaged in whatever the organization they're part of. So our view is we hire people that care about the community, and we support them in the community. So it's kind of, I'll call both, I think it answers your question in both ways, both on the corporate side and also kind of a community-wise.
So we are a strategic investor, and our strategic mandate is to help Intel Corporation not get disrupted or increase our sales or help our business units. So that's why we exist. We don't necessarily exist for the purpose of just producing a financial return, but we do that as part of our mandate. But our overall mandate is to add strategic value to Intel Corporation. That's why we exist. And so everything we look at has that element in it. And I'll just give you an example of something we were talking about just today. There's a company that we're looking at that's going to make a $23 video camera that you can put in your home, and it'll show you your home and video stream. And we asked ourselves, is this something where our silicon is going to go in there? And then the answer is that $25, $30 price point. We're not going to make a lot of money putting our silicon in there. But the discussion then goes on, and the strategic element of the discussion is, if everybody had that camera in their home, imagine in China, for example, and everybody streamed all day long their homes, what's happening in their home. And there's something very unique about the Chinese, and that Chinese like to keep an eye on what's happening in their home because they have either kids or they have elderly parents or whatever have you. So this concept is very, very popular in China. That is, people want to be able to watch on their handheld device what's going on in their home at any given point in time. And if a lot of people do that, that's a huge server opportunity for us. And that's an aha moment for us. We say, wow, that's strategic to us, because obviously, storage, video streams create network opportunities, storage opportunities, server opportunities, handheld device opportunities, all of which play to our businesses and strengths. And so that's the kind of strategic thinking we do. And that's how we relate it to our business. And you'd be amazed at us investing in companies that you wouldn't think of why on earth would Intel invest in this particular company. But there is some logic, hidden logic there that leads us to do that. Coming to your water question, I think that water question is a, 200-year-old question that has never been, nobody has really looked at the water issue from either an application of technology to it, or somebody trying to figure out, okay, how can I make it more efficient? How can I make it, maybe disrupt is not the right word, but next time you open the tap and use the water, think through how much of the water just goes straight down into the drain and how much of the water actually touches your hand or your face or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And you'd be amazed that the percentage of water that just gets drained away. Now, again, that's, we in the urban setting only use 20% of the water, and I as a farmer know that farming uses 80% of the water, and something needs to happen there as well. But I think the application of technology will solve that problem. There'll be solutions there that will help, and I think that we'll see emergence of companies and entrepreneurs attacking that problem.
Maybe one last question.
My name is Nagesh Maligari, and the question is for Arvind. It's about the wearable segment. Can you please comment about that segment and how you see that growing in the area of, like, say, Apple Watches coming out or Fitbits and other things. And also, when you're creating a new vertical for investment, what kind of thought process goes in?
Yeah. Good question. Creating new verticals is pretty tough, as we all know. It takes quite a bit, but we will see variables. I think that all of us will be wearing, if not on our wrist, on our body, somehow or other, we'll all be wearing something that's got compute in it, that's connected, either directly to a server or to your handheld device and then to the server. And it will be doing any number of different things. The number one and the most immediate thing that comes to mind, obviously, is health. I think that there are huge health opportunities in the wearable space that have not been fully exhausted at this point in time. I think there are lots of opportunities there. Monitoring your health, reducing, being able to detect strokes, being able to, if you detect a stroke a couple of hours before actually happening, or a heart attack a couple of hours before it happens, the dollar that gets spent after, the dollar that will get saved in detecting a heart attack or a stroke an hour and a half, 2 hours before it actually happens is humongous. The delta is just unbelievable. And so I think there are lots of opportunities, and I think that we'll see a lot of innovation in that space, and software and hardware. Yeah.
Great. So maybe in closing, it's great to be up here. It's great to be part of the Churchill organization, being part of it since inception, and it is an honor to be up here, Arvind, with you.
Greg, thank you so much. Karen, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Arvind and Greg, thank you so much on behalf of our audience and Churchill Club in general for sharing your perspectives with us so freely. We really appreciate it. We did want to give you a small gift. We felt very insecure, though, about giving you wine. So, but we do feel great about giving you this Churchill Club speaker T-shirt.
All right.
All right.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
We hope you wear that in good health. A recording of this program will be available on our YouTube channel hopefully tomorrow, but within the next couple of days, and you will find recordings of most of our other programs there as well. We hope that's a useful resource for you, and you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. See you next time. Good night.
Hey. Thank you.